The story begins by introducing a man named Vikir van Baskerville, who was sentenced to be executed by the guillotine for the association with the demon clan. The charges against him was falsified and framed by his father Hugo of Baskerville. At the guillotine, Vikir vowed that if he were to ever live again, he will have his revenge on Hugo and the entire Baskerville family's hound. Few seconds later, his head rode. Vikir woke up confused as to where he was and why his body felt so heavy and his surroundings very noisy. He wondered if this was hell, but later realized that he is at the grand estate of the Baskerville family, face to face with the culprit for his framing and execution, Hugo, but a younger version of Hugo. It was in that moment Vikir realized for certain that he has regressed back to when he was a baby. Vikir lived his past life as a hound, born from an illegitimate family. He received training in a poor environment. In the Baskerville family, a hound must be devoted to their mission, being it assassination, intelligence, ambush, threading, and the like. A hound does all the dirty work. And everything was done in order to make the Baskerville family the best among all the 9 families. The reason Vikir stayed loyal to Hugo and the Baskerville family was to be acknowledged by them. But 10 years after the open of the demonic realm, a fight broke out between humans and demons, of which humans ended up becoming victorious. The reward that was given to Vikir for his loyalty and life servitude for the Baskerville family was execution. And the real reason for that was he knew too much. Vikir decided he won't live that life again for the second time, and he must become stronger to enact his revenge. The patriarch, Hugo, commands all children to be sent to the Cradle of Swords, a maze of swords where children are thrown into to find the exit for themselves, after which they are to get to the Styx River at the edge of the exit to be examined for their talent. In order to get to the Styx River first, you need to head straight out of the helix-shaped wall of blades. The Styx River is a legendary river that turns children's bodies into irons. However, there is a limit to how many children it can affect. Vikir intent to monopolize the Styx River's blessing for as long as he can due to being ousted by his siblings before his regression, and couldn't receive the effect. In the river, baby Vikir willed himself about how he must endure for as long as he can. He also felt the water seeping deep into his body and bones through his cuts. The assistants present were all pleading for Vikir to come out, or else he would drown if he stayed underwater any longer. Hugo, with a sinister laugh, pulled a suffocating Vikir out of the water due to the fact that Vikir had no intention of coming out. Hugo asked the head butler, John Barrymore, baby Vikir's name. He commended Vikir for being very greedy, for not just being in the river for 7 minutes but also drinking it too. Hugo also notices that Vikir has already developed teeth. Baby Vikir, being held upside down by the leg, face to face with Hugo, thought to himself, saying, "Enjoy this as much as you can, Hugo. As of now I need time to sharpen my canines silently, for when the time comes for me to rip my master's head off, the Baskerville family will disappear into history." Baby Vikir, lying in his cradle, recollect his life before his regression and all his numerous deeds he did in the name of the Baskerville family before his execution. At the age of 8, he was talented enough to be called a genius, but he was considered ordinary in the family. At age 20, he took on the assassination, espionage, and conquest-type missions. 29, he felt that he had reached his limit in swordsmanship compared to those of direct lineage. Age 30, the leading of the demonic realm opened, marking the beginning of the demon clan's invasion. 35, he endured through the era of destruction, slaughtering monsters left and right. 39, the long war finally ended with the victory of the human realm. Then at 40 years, he was rewarded for his loyalty with defamation, false accusation, and the guillotine's blade. He commends himself for having a better starting point in life than before. At the same time, a maid placed a box in baby Vikir's cradle, complained about why her madam wants that kind of thing in baby Vikir's bed. Turns out the thing in the box was 2 large freaking mambas. Vikir, surprised but expecting something unexpected because no one would give him, a bastard, a present. There were a few in the Baskerville who would be called Madam, and whoever had done this was trying to reduce competition. Vikir thought of how this act would have killed all the babies in the nursery. Baby Vikir squeezed the two mambas while thinking menacingly of bringing the entire family down with his own two hands. The next day, the people of Baskerville were shocked when they found baby Vikir sleeping peacefully next to the dead snakes. The nannies that were on shift that night were executed after they were tortured. The reason for the snake's appearance remained unknown. Only Vikir knew. 8 years later, an instructor teaches the young masters about the levels of swordsmanship. He says if a person cannot yet imbue a sword with mana, then that person is a sword beginner. Next, if you can infuse the blade with a little bit of mana, is called sword expert. Then when the blade emits mana in liquid-like aura form, that's sword graduator. The last level being is when the aura is solid and the form can freely be changed, and that's called sword master. The instructor said that Hugo was in the sword master level. Vikir wondered about how many years he will need to kill Hugo. Vikir gained the attention of the triplet in the Baskerville. They thought they could bully Vikir for fun, but little did they know it would be the other way around. Vikir remembered how the triplet were the one that stabbed him when he was running away after his defamation. They were called Hibro, Middleborough and Lowborough Le Baskerville. Collectively called Hugo Le Baskerville Trident. After 10 minutes, the triplet found out that the rumor of Vikir having an impervious skin to regular blade due the 7 minutes in the Styx River and the killing of the mambas were true. They become frightened and didn't want to bully Vikir anymore, but it was Vikir's turn to return their fun. Lowborough restrained Vikir and covered his mouth, but his finger was bit off. Vikir also crashes Hiborough hand with a vindictive smile on his face. He tells them they should keep playing to the very end. Vikir continued to ruthlessly beat the trident while taunting them relentlessly. At this point the triplets were beyond scared, but Vikir gave them an ultimatum. The choice was only one would be allowed to leave, but they have to decide for themselves who does. That or they can continue from where they left off. They triplet dumbfounded, realize they have no choice and begun to fight each other. This made Vikir victoriously smile while watching, as this made Hugo Trident split and their like-minded behavior severed. Later that day, Barrymore gives Hugo the report that the Morgue clan has started the ruby mine in their territory, but Hugo replied by saying an opportunity to discuss that matter will come soon. And when that time comes, the Morgue clan will seek them out first. Barrymore further reports that regarding the interim evaluation of the juvenile fortress, Vikir scored the highest on the written exam. And the practical exams will commence in 5 days. He also tells Hugo that during the exams, there was a big fight. Hugo asked for casualties, but there weren't any. However, Hiborough's teeth have been completely damaged, Middleborough's jaw has been smashed in, and Lowborough's left index finger has been amputated. They have recovered since being treated, but their psychological damage done to them seems significant. Hugo was shocked to learn that Vikir was responsible and was summoned. Vikir feigned to be thinking while saying the triplet received proper medical treatment after the incident. But Hugo was not interested in that but the damage on their psyche. The triplets have been eating separately and don't speak to each other anymore. Hugo asks Vikir if he feels no guilt for turning his older brothers into a total mess. But I'm stronger, said Vikir, and the strongest person can't be wrong. Hugo further stated that the triplets said they graciously forgave him. Vikir coldly answered that he believes forgiveness is just an excuse made by the weak who cannot seek revenge due to their lack of strength. This was the exact same answer before Vikir's regression, given by Hugo to the youngest daughter of a family that was ruined by the Baskerville clan, who visited Hugo after she became a nun claiming she had forgiven him. Hugo agrees with Vikir and congratulates him for understanding the family's motto very well. Barrymore was tasked with allowing Vikir to take whichever snack he wanted from the food storage. Thanking Hugo, Vikir requested for chocolate. He began to leave, but not without Hugo adding, he should try to do well on the interim evaluation and not lose to the direct descendants. In the storage room, Vikir said he doesn't want the processed chocolates. Rather the cacao beans that has rich aroma called bloody beans. It is revealed that one bean can produce 100 liters of chocolate. Barrymore acknowledged Vikir for his brilliance for finding a way within the patriarch restrictions to have as much chocolate as he wants. Vikir, however, did not want the chocolate to eat it but to use it in the practical exam. It is explained that in this world, the Baskerville family is referred to as the Bercier family. The children from this family are put through a thorough early education. When they're able to take their first step, for their basic stamina, they need to run up a steep mountain. And except for the allocated times, they aren't allowed to lie down or be on their stomachs. When it's also time to sleep, in order to adjust to tough environments, they sleep alongside a monster corpse. When that period ends, they are 8 years old and the young hounds will start their deadly evaluation. This is what caused the Baskerville family to be called the Berserker family. In the mountain, which located on the outskirts of the territory, filled with monsters, the young hounds gather at the Le Rouge et Le Noir mountain. The family's instructor, Pavlov van Baskerville, lectures about what the young masters need to do in the practical exam. Pavlov explains that they need to survive for a month on this mountain, for which they are to hunt large and stronger monsters. There should be mindful of 2 conditions and survive. Which were, the points of being successful and surviving are 10 points, if they survive without becoming disabled, it's 30 points. If they fail others in the exams and survive, then that's 50 points. When one also survive after defeating a monster, then it's 70 points. If all above conditions are fulfilled, 90 points are awarded. Additionally, if they are able to steal a badge that's given to each of them, extra points will be given as well. There are no 100 points in this exam, and if you die, well, your points will be 0, obviously. The young masters were advised to not exit the designated area because the Le Rouge et Le Noir mountain is a restricted area with many undiscovered things. During the exams, Guardian Knight, also known as Shadow Dogs, will be hiding and grading them. Among the young masters, the rumors about Vikir were whispered, making the triplets tremble with fear. Pavlov rang a bell to start the exams. He wished the young masters fortune as they quickly dispersed, each silently thinking about strategies beneficial to acquire many points as possible. The triplets, however, continue to quarrel. It's discouraged but not prohibited for the young masters to kill each other, and the Shadow Dogs are there to keep casualties to a minimum. However, if you kill someone, points will be deducted. Vikir's Shadow Dog tailed them all while wondering what the genius Vikir, who has distinguished himself since childhood, will show in his hunting. He is shocked, however, that Vikir plans on relaxing and camping. Vikir does nothing but hunts for food or gathers equipment. This makes the Shadow Dog wonder if the rumor about Vikir being a genius was false, and he decides there was really no need to observe him any longer. Vikir noticed his interferer is gone and finally decides to hunt after he was done laying out traps. Few days later, he head inside the restricted area. During his scouting days, he used to going around this area casually. The burning smell that pierces his nose, burnt tree roots. Vikir found what he was looking for, the burning stool. And there was only one monster around there that had that kind of dropping. A freaking hellhound. At age 18, before his regression, he barely defeated a hellhound alone. So even with a better start than his past life, it will be almost impossible to defeat it alone. However, Vikir knows a hellhound weakness that makes it possible for even a child of his age to win against it. The hellhound growled and immediately lunged at Vikir. But Vikir, holding a knife, dodged swiftly by sliding underneath the hellhound. A hellhound first weakness is that they only move in a straight line and finds it difficult to sharp changes in direction. The second being that it is unable to cross water regardless of how little there is. Vikir poured water in an arc shape in front of him, and this made the hellhound slow down significantly. As the hellhound moved forward slowly, it exposed the weakness common to all canine monsters, which was opening their mouth while running. Vikir filled a bean into the hellhound's mouth. Moments later the hellhound fell down to the ground struggling to stay alive. Turns out chocolate is poisonous to canines, and with a bean concentrated 100 times over, the hellhound stood no chance. Vikir pulled out his sword and aimed at the hellhound's kidneys. The kidneys are the only weakened part that isn't protected by the ribcage. Vikir plunged his sword, destroying the kidneys. Killing a demonic creature bestows on one's body with experience or karma, which leads to strengthening the body. Vikir, pleased with himself as his sword is lighter now and is confident with his pace, he will be able to regain the strength he once had before his regression. He's also enjoying what the look will be on Hugo's face when he finds out an 8-year-old child hunted a demonic creature with risk rating B+. With the hellhound, Vikir has basically secured the first position in this practical exams. Vikir already decided what reward he's gonna ask for. A reward he would have dreamed of asking in his past life, and that is, a book of which no one knows of its value yet. Vikir decapitated the hellhound. At the same time, the rest of the pack appeared, for which Vikir was delighted because he never planned on killing only one hellhound anyway. The pack immediately got scared shitless, making Vikir think they're scared of a mere 8-year-old's bloodthirst. But hellhounds never submit to their prey even if they were to die. Turns out it was a freaking large Cerberus, which has a risk rating of A+. The Cerberus was wounded with numerous injuries. Vikir deduced that it must have been chased by the barbarian tribe because their territory is right across the mountain. This was the perfect chance for Vikir had to test himself, as he has reached a high level of expertise as a sword expert. He has also mastered the Baskerville third technique and has reached the level that other hounds would attain when they turn into adults. Vikir launched at the Cerberus and expertly swung his sword, landing a few blows. Vikir thought his attacks were working and became confident due to the fact that before his regression, he had refined swordsmanship throughout the war with the demon clan to the point where there was no sign of unnecessary movements to his techniques. He also had been strengthened by the Styx River. Moment later, Vikir mistakenly let his guard down, and that allowed the Cerberus to use its claws to launch a powerful hit which threw Vikir against a tree, causing him to cough out blood. Vikir momentarily lost consciousness from the attack. His entire left arm is aching due to receiving the hit head-on from the Cerberus. This made Vikir wonder if his arm was torn off. But it turns out to be 3 large claws marks oozing blood on his arm. At the same time, the Cerberus predatorily approach and immediately lunge at Vikir again. He narrowly moves sideways as the Cerberus shatters the tree stem into pieces. For Vikir to get this much injured, even with the effects of the Styx River and the Cerberus wounded, it will be deadly to take another hit. As a regressed veteran hunter, Vikir deduced the best course of action was to retreat. Vikir ran at his max with the Cerberus in pursuit. Thanking the barbarians, Vikir realized if it weren't for the injuries on the Cerberus side, he would have already been caught and torn apart. Getting over the steel fence, Vikir head towards the place he prepared. He calculates if he is caught before that he will be dead. Vikir barely gets to his destination as the Cerberus has caught up to him. He front flips over his trap as the Cerberus millimeters away from biting his head off. The Cerberus fell into the pit of spikes. Welcome to the cradle of swords, Cerberus, Vikir victoriously thought. He is also pleased with the fact that the trap that was intended for the Hellhound pack was used to catch a Cerberus. And just like Hellhounds, Cerberus is also a canine monster, so the bloody bean's essence Vikir coated on the spearhead should work like poison. However, the Cerberus did not die instantly due to it being a high-ranking demonic creature and managed to exit the pit. Vikir grabbed a wooden spear, aimed and threw at the Cerberus. The spear bounces off after it nicked the back of the Cerberus. Vikir started counting as the now enraged Cerberus approaches him. However, it died and fell to the ground at count 7. This is due to the wooden spear laced with the bloody mamba's venomous fang, which renders anything living creature incapable of more than 7 steps once bitten. Vikir hid the fang when he was younger. the energy from the Cerberus seeped in Vikir's body after all 3 heads had died. Vikir wondered how he was going to carry the Cerberus, and due to the cause of death being quite obvious, he guessed the guardian knight that saw him carve the wooden spears will be his witness to attest to this achievement. Cerberuses are gatekeepers that protect their territory, so it implies that this Cerberus must have been protecting its dungeon somewhere nearby. A dungeon is a strange space that holds treasure and also most times inhabited by powerful demonic creatures. Vikir decided on visiting the dungeon since there is a high chance that the dungeon is currently unguarded. He covered himself with the Cerberus's scent to avoid confronting small monsters. Dried soil, rotten leaves, moist roots, drool and footprints, Vikir backtracked the tracks and found the dungeon. Before his regression, Vikir recalled the dungeon will be discovered empty in 10 years' time. He sensed the mana that's underneath the dungeon's rotten surface and couldn't see any light due to its depth. Vikir entered the dungeon excitedly, wondering what kind of treasures were waiting inside. In the dungeon, Vikir saw that there are veins of ruby minerals throughout the area and guessed it must be connected to the Red All Mountain. As he approaches the end of the dungeon, there was a red bright light that was a contraption which releases light by absorbing mana and sending it to a ruby. The ruby was in the epicenter in there. Vikir also noticed a human skeleton with a letter lying beside it. The letter was addressed to whoever comes after the writer, warning them. The writer did not indicate his name, but Vikir deduced him to be a Baskerville. The reason being the penmanship is identical to the Baskerville's clan handed down for generations. The letter states of 2 brothers, the younger brother, Abel, stumble upon this dungeon. Abel and his older brother raided the dungeon, having killed myriads of monsters and overcoming innumerable trials made it to the stone chamber. They came across the ultimate riddle there, and this riddle had tied them down there for 3 long years. The riddle is, what entered was once 1, but within has become 2. Only as 1 may they leave. The brothers came at a conclusion that since they were twins conceived in their mother's womb, they were 1, but upon birth, they had been split into 2. So that means only one of them can leave with what they came for. The brothers duel each other. The battle was intense, with the elder brother Cain stabbing Abel in the heart, killing him. However, nothing changed within the chamber of the dungeon. He decided to leave the dungeon with a huge regret and cautioned any descendants who comes there to leave immediately, as there is nothing to gain in this demonic cave other than to be driven mad with greed. Vikir disregarded the letter, claiming he doesn't have a twin, and besides, the brothers misinterpreted the riddle incorrectly. Anyway, there wasn't a dungeon which exists and couldn't be raided. A while later, Vikir figured out the riddle and commented on how Cain and Abel were unlucky. They were stuck in their preconception and were unable to solve the riddle because there were 2 of them. Vikir smashed the glowing ruby to bits, claiming, when 1 entered the dungeon, they were 1 within the pitch-black tunnel. But the moment we reached the bright stone chamber, we become 2 because of the ruby's light cast a shadow. So by smashing the source of light, it becomes dark, making a person be 1 again. With that, the stage of the stone chamber was unlocked. Turns out the demonic cave's relic was a Beelzebub. And only the bloodline of the Baskerville clan can draw Beelzebub. Vikir remembers seeing it in an illustration in a book on mythology during his past life's youth. The fly of gluttony, Beelzebub, in the ancient myths of the unprecedented great demons who invaded the continent, there were the 7 calamities, the demon constellations. In order to stop the 7 calamities, the leaders of the 7 great clans each stepped up and faced one of the demon constellations. At that time, the demon that the Baskerville clans had faced was the fly of gluttony, Beelzebub. And so, the remains of the subjugated Beelzebub were sealed away in the Baskerville territory, and the demonic energy that Beelzebub spewed caused the monsters to gather. In the future, the Beelzebub fell into the hands of the demons and brings death to innumerable humans on the battlefield. Vikir proudly proclaiming how that won't be happening in this life as he pulled the Beelzebub. The process seems painful though as time go by. Vikir successfully bonded with the Beelzebub, forming an extended sword attached to his right hand, with the Beelzebub emitting a bright dark red aura around it and his hand. Vikir wondered how much stronger he can be in this do-over life. Vikir, finally satisfied that there is nothing he could get out from the dungeon, decided to head back. But he immediately crumbled with dizziness due to an intense hunger caused by the Beelzebub. The Beelzebub buzz tells Vikir to feed it something. Vikir exits the dungeon with an insane appetite that makes his stomach feel like it's tearing apart. He also noticed that his smell is more sensitive than usual because of the hunger, and something smells delicious. Turns out it was the hellhound he killed earlier. The Beelzebub immediately starts sucking the hellhound's blood, and Vikir's stomach gradually feels better once more. Vikir realized the Beelzebub being starved for a long time is the reason why the area has turned deserted. He wondered how much he would have to feed it to sate it. After it was fed, Vikir found out the Beelzebub unique skill, which was the ability to turn your opponent's ability into your own. It could absorb a limitless amount of skills, and those whose abilities were absorbed were utterly destroyed. The max amount of skills Vikir can absorb was 3, with Hellhound's Hemorrhage being one of them. It dawned on Vikir then that he could also absorb skills from the Cerberus also. Vikir had to put an end to the Beelzebub feeding on the Cerberus because it was going to be difficult to explain when it is checked later and found that it's too damaged. The slots for adding 2 skills were Incinerate Cerberus and Rapid Regeneration Brown Rat Norvegicus. Turns out the Beelzebub also fed on a dead rat stuck under the Cerberus. The practical exams came to an end and the young masters turned in their hunt. An evaluation followed after that, and the corpses of those demonic creatures that the young hounds caught were created into shields, swords, necklaces and others. This was returned to them as their spoils. Pavlov and the Guardian Knights were all shocked with Vikir's hunt. The Patriarch, Hugo, was also shocked when Barrymore told him and asked how Vikir was able to kill a Cerberus. Barrymore replied that the Cerberus was already injured by the barbarian tribe and had been poisoned. Hugo wanted to know what poison was strong enough to take down a Cerberus and where he got it, but Barrymore had no answer. He says nothing about that was recorded in the hunting log. And Vikir didn't answer because he returned to the dormitory stating he was tired. Hugo acknowledges how Vikir has already gotten sly and further says knowledge is power and power is your worth anyway. Again, Barrymore was surprised that a talent like Vikir's came from a young master with the Van name, not Lao or Lu. Hugo proudly responds about how he is different from the previous clan heads and doesn't care about bloodline when he raises a hunting dog. As for him, talent and the determination is what he cares about, whether it is royal family or a bastard bloodline doesn't matter. Vikir was summoned moments later and asked how he killed the Cerberus. He boldly stated that he fed the Cerberus with chocolate to kill it, knowing full well that it is deadly to dog-type demonic creatures. Hugo also asked if that was the reason Vikir requested for chocolate, and why didn't he answer Barrymore when he asked for the information. Vikir simply answered that it was the reason why, and Barrymore is not his master. Then who is? Hugo questioned. Since I belong to the clan, the master of the clan is my master as well, was replied given by Vikir. Hugo was pleased Vikir is well learned, and as his reward, the corpse of the Cerberus will be solely his. Also, if Vikir have a wish, it will be granted to him for scoring the highest. With unwavering stance, Vikir requested access to the 10,000 Epistle Library. This library is one of the largest libraries in the Empire and located deep within the heart of the Baskerville clan. However, only the Patriarch, the second in command along with their direct descendants are allowed access to it. Vikir planned on sneaking in if he was denied, but was shocked when Hugo allowed it. Hugo even recommended Vikir to read the Baskerville 6th technique, which located within the 6th restricted zone deep inside the library. There's has never been a Baskerville illegitimate child with a Van middle name allowed to go past the 4th technique. As a bastard, Vikir was surprised that Hugo has even allowed this, but then he remembered that it is only the 6th technique compared to Hugo's current cultivation level, which is the 7th technique. Also before his regression, Hugo was able to bear 9 of his fangs. Vikir hasn't forgotten about the life of discrimination as an illegitimate child and his will of surpassing Hugo to enact his revenge. He mischievously thought of obtaining the greatest essence of Baskerville, which is the textbook of swordsmanship containing the teachings of the first patriarch who was able to subjugate the 7 great calamities. And what's satisfying is Hugo will be the one to hand it over. Vikir entered the library, reminiscing about all the books on swordsmanship that he so desperately wanted in his previous life. No matter how much mana an illegitimate child of Baskerville had, they can't learn any swordsmanship that is superior to the 4th technique. This is to ensure that the children who became hound don't bare their teeth towards their master. The Baskerville family implemented this as a defense mechanism. Vikir decided to learn the swordsmanship book on the 6th technique first because he had been curious and dreamt of it for so long. Before his regression, he learnt the theory behind the 1st to 4th technique until he got sick of it. It was to deduce and speculate the theory of the 5th technique. Vikir guessed that Hugo allowed him to the library thinking that an 8-year-old child wouldn't be able to memorize the technique in a day. After Vikir learned what was required in drawing the 5th and 6th tooth, he left that section of the library. The reason being that he didn't care about the 6th technique but a stage much higher than that. The guards questioned the young master Vikir if he was done already or has forgotten something of which they can bring it to him. Vikir replied that he was finished with what he came for but wants to read other books so they don't need to worry about him leaving that section of the library so soon. After a little search, Vikir found the book he was looking for. The Lurking Ambush. This book on the basics of the 1st technique that the Baskerville children don't read due to the ripped pages. It's considered a useless miscellaneous book. Again, before his regression, the hound squad that Vikir was affiliated to found a strange relic in a dungeon that was on the border of the Le Rouge et Le Noir mountain. It was a single ripped page from a swordsmanship textbook. A page with Baskerville's handwriting written on it. Hugo found it remarkable and goes through the entire library trying to find the book that matched it. That was the swordsmanship book A Lurking Ambush where the Baskerville ancestors wrote in the 10th technique. Hugo, who had gone crazy for the 10th technique, released the hound and found the remaining 6 pages that had the technique written on them. Hugo then found out that the remaining pages were hidden in the 7 great families and declared war on them. He sent hounds on those who had refused to hand over the page after sacrificing so many hounds for those pages. Vikir remembered all the contents that were written on those pages because he was the hound that reclaimed all those pages. And the reason Vikir couldn't go beyond the 4th technique was that he had no access to the original book. Vikir studied the book the entire night till dawn and memorized the book's contents from start to finish. He knew he couldn't draw the 10th teeth with his young body. With the absence of the guardian knights, Vikir practiced the 1st technique, followed by the 2nd, then the 3rd, immediately after that the 4th. And finally, imagining Hugo's older appearance, destroyed it with the 5th technique. Though it was weak, Vikir was overjoyed with excitement to the point that he could cry. He acknowledged that his previous life was really a pathetic one. With all his hard work, he was able to just obtain the highest level of graduator aura. He wasn't able to learn a suitable sword technique, so the direct descendants were hostile towards him. The reason Vikir couldn't reach the stage of the 5th tooth was him being a bastard. After successfully drawing out the 5th tooth, Vikir figured as long as his mana can support it, he can reach the level he was before his regression very soon. His mana capacity has also increased as well, and his liquid aura, the sign of a graduator, shows that Vikir has gone from a high-class sword expert to a low-class graduator. Still in the state of excitement, Vikir thought a level that took him 30 years to reach was achieved by his current 8-year-old self. Graduators are on a completely different level from sword experts. The solid aura starts to turn into liquid aura, the density also increases and allows it to be used more freely. Vikir's swordsmanship is also much better than before he regressed. He commends himself and is determined to not stop at the 5th technique. but a sword technique that can reach the 10th technique with endless possibilities. Vikir previously learned the piercing fang, which could make you stronger in a shorter period of time, but it had its limitations. On the other hand, the lurking ambush is a perfect sword technique which can smoothly transition between offense and defense with no growth limitation. If Vikir put his mind to it, he might even be able to challenge a mid-class graduator and has a 100% chance with assassination, and about 50% chance if he faced them head-on. Vikir's issue at the moment was how much he should show to Hugo. He knows he can neither show off too much nor too little, but something just enough to meet Hugo expectations without making himself a future threat. Vikir used a magnifying glass to burn the book, which will make Hugo and the hound unable from reaching the 10th technique. He feigns an apology to the guards when they came to that section due to the smell of the burnt book. They were relieved that the book was from the section that was for useless books. Vikir covertly threatening them, and it was agreed that it is a secret as long as the young master doesn't say anything. This also makes the guards feel a bit uncomfortable, and they continue to say they will take the blame for not looking after Vikir properly. Weirdly enough, Vikir gained the respect of the guards, and he was summoned by Hugo. Hugo asks Vikir if he's been enlightened. Vikir gave a vague answer to the question but alluded to having an aura. He claims to feel something warm and sharp, yet soft and viscous. Having aura is the sign that you've officially entered the world of the sword. Even geniuses have to train without rest until the age of 15, in order to reach the level of low-class sword expert. Hugo had to shut down his excitement and asked Vikir for a demonstration. Barrymore asked Hugo how he was going to test Vikir. "A monster," replied Hugo. Turns out the monster was a hungry and feisty orc. The other young masters present were all fearful of the situation and wondered how Vikir, who was 8 years old hound, supposed to handle an orc that should be handled by at least 15 years old hound. On Hugo's orders, the orc was released. The orc made a loud noise and launched at Vikir. But Vikir skillfully cut off the arm of the orc, surprising his fellow young mates and the orc. He dashes forward and slices the leg, also causing the orc to stumble and fall to the ground, trembling with fear as its rapid regeneration hasn't been activated. Hugo watched the fight closely with an unimpressed look. Vikir figured out that Hugo must be deducing what he learned at the library. With a calculated thought, Vikir imbued his sword with aura, shocking all spectators around. The frightening orc didn't stand a chance as it was blasted to death as Vikir aimed for its head. Barrymore was certain that the aura was of a low-class sword expert and congratulated Hugo on producing a genius. After regaining his composure, Hugo commented that Vikir only won because the orc was much weaker. This is because an orc is known for their rapid regeneration. However, this dead orc was oozing so much blood even after its death. Hugo's smirking was cut short when Vikir asked for a much stronger opponent. The young master's bewildered with Vikir's request. Vikir, however, thinks it'd be better to show off his power to a certain degree, and if he is lucky enough, his progress will be acknowledged and he will be separated from Hugo. As in, dispatched to a remote area or admitted to an academy. Hugo grants his request, saying Vikir should have real-life experiences at his age. Hugo asked Barrymore that there's a creature that was captured during the barbarian raid for the experiment. "Yes, there is one left," answered Barrymore. Hugo ordered that creature to be released. This terrified the young masters but intrigued Vikir. The creature was a huge troll, far deadlier than the orc. Vikir asked Hugo's granted permission to start the duel, and the troll was released from his chains. As soon as the chains fell to the ground, Vikir dashed forward towards the troll. At the same time, the troll clenches its fist and aims it at Vikir. It hit the ground though as Vikir dodged by jumping sideways to the troll's blind spot but didn't take the opportunity to strike. Vikir rather backpedaled his steps, shocking the young masters with the missed opportunity. But Hugo commends Vikir for his good thinking because it is unwise to attack a troll unless it's a fatal one due to troll's excellent regeneration power. This was also the reason why a plan was needed to hunt a troll. Vikir dodges every attack launched by the troll. The troll seems to be wearing down and Vikir's hound mates are really amazed by his judgment. Vikir thought of how slow the troll is, and if he were to use his true power, he can easily kill it. However, that would put him in a predicament, so he needs to make it look plausible, like using the troll's power against it. Vikir uses the first technique against the troll, slicing it at multiple parts. But it regenerated almost instantly. That attack will kill the troll a while later because of the Beelzebub's hemorrhage skill added, but that would be meaningless. Hugo calls for the fight to end, but Vikir asked for one last attack because he's had an epiphany. "Alright," said Hugo. This was what Vikir planned all along. In order to make his level he was about to display plausible for every spectator. He imbued the sword with an aura and draw out the second fang, decapitating the troll, shocking everybody. This is because in the Iron-Blooded Sword clan Baskerville, a person's life is formulaically set. At age 15 is when one is able to imbue the sword with mana, and normally hounds attain the Baskerville first technique at that stage too. But in that moment, for the first time in all Baskerville clan's history, an 8-year-old has attained the second technique, which is normally achieved at 18 years of age. This shocked Hugo to his core as what had just happened. Vikir nervously acted, claiming he did it. A week later, the young hounds eat at their canteen, with Vikir seemingly detest his food that he can't get used to, a miscellaneous meat porridge. Ever since the incident, everybody has been avoiding him though. In the Baskerville, power is everything in the family, so it is obvious that his young mates were fearful of him. Vikir reminisces about Hugo's priceless expression about the incident a week ago. What Vikir revealed was the Baskerville second technique, which is a mid-sword expert, but Vikir's actually at the low-rank graduator and can weakly perform the fifth technique. With the troll skill super speed regeneration troll he got, Vikir became stronger than the average graduator. And Vikir has been eating a lot ever since he got the Beelzebub. The triplets approach Vikir, alerting him from his thoughts. However, Vikir spat out his porridge when the triplet complimented him. Vikir thought angrily as to what deceitful technique the triplets are employing. He considered beating them up again, consequences be damn anyway. Barrymore interrupts Vikir's thoughts, claiming the patriarch is asking for him. At the Baskerville estate, a carriage was parked in front with a prestigious flag depicting the Mog clan's badge proudly. In the estate, Hugo confidently greets the Morg clan's patriarch by proxy, Adolf Morg. He responds to Hugo with a rather high-spirited domineer. They covertly taunt each other as the two power heads clash. They were not always on bad terms though. It is explained that a past emperor once said magic and swords are a complementary pair. Because of that, the Baskervilles and the Morgs began joint training sessions. Only children within the age of 8 and 15 were to participate. And it was carried out in a good atmosphere as an annual event. However, a problem occurred. There was a ruby mine in between the Baskerville and Morg territory, and blood ended up being spilt over this conflict. As a result, the two patriarchs came to be on bad terms, but they continue with the joint trainings per the emperor's command. This is why the patriarch's younger brother Adolf came in his stead. Adolf complimented the Baskerville's empire of birthing a rare genius, a supernova as he called it, only born once a century, but Hugo just proudly brushed it off as not a big deal. This shocked Adolf though, as Hugo is actually reacting positively about his child. Adolf continues to say they're also blessed as well, as they have also produced a genius as well. He tells someone to come in, and a young redhead girl with a feisty and undeterred attitude came in and sits at his side. Adolf introduces her to Hugo as Camus and cheerfully asks her to greet the Baskerville's patriarch. Camus immediately calls Hugo a thief and proclaims the ruby mine's theirs. Adolf uncomfortably reprimands Camus in polite behavior. This angers Hugo, but he regains his composure, stating that Camus is just a child and Adolf doesn't need to explain the problems of Morg's children education to him. Camus doesn't back down though, but continues with her rude behavior, causing Hugo to loudly shut her down. Adolf complained about Hugo perhaps threatening his 8-year-old niece, but Vikir interrupts by saying morgues don't teach their children to not envy what's not theirs. Barrymore announces Vikir's presence to his patriarch, and Adolf guessed that Vikir must be the supernova he mentioned earlier. Camus immediately got up and challenged Vikir on what he said. When Vikir heard Camus' name, he recalls what she became before he regressed. Camus Morgue became her clan's iron-blooded empress. She was called a genius of geniuses even in the Morgue clan, which has raised countless great mages. In her peak, she killed all of the monsters and barbarians in the Le Rouge et Le Noir mountain by herself, and burned them to death on spears, creating the famous border of blood and ashes. He also complimented on her beauty, and she was able to manipulate even the imperial family. She was therefore called the fire goddess of authority. But that's in the far future, as Camus is just a child right now. Vikir antagonized her by simply saying that Camus came a long way here just to throw a tantrum. They argue back and forth a while until Camus decides to visually explain with an ice sculpture, surprising his uncle Adolf. Vikir thought they were going to fight though. She states that the top-grade rubies come from the mine, and it is situated on the border of the Morgue and Baskerville, called the Joint Security Area. The entrance to the mine is on Morgue territory, and the mine runs underneath the Baskerville territory. The Baskervilles are asserting that it's trespassing the mining and rejecting the Morgue's offer to pay rent for the territory. Vikir answered that the rubies are commonly used for magic ingredients, and the Baskerville clan doesn't need to mine the rubies. But it is a tragedy that there isn't an idiot in the clan that would open up the land to earn a few pennies. The Baskervilles are interested in their land and don't want any intruders. Camus again tried to forcefully explain her view. She points out on the sculpture that her right side is their land and the left side is the Baskervilles. She uses her entire right arm to illustrate the tunnel and asks Vikir whose arm it was. Vikir grabbed her arm and stated that it's in his land, so it's his, obviously. Camus misunderstood, blushing furiously, and asked why she belongs to Vikir. Who said you're mine? Asked Vikir, as he pulled a short knife from his back, shocking Barrymore, Adolf, and Hugo. With a terrifying bloodlust expression, Vikir answered, I'm saying that your arm is mine. Camus screamed for her uncle's help as soon as Vikir brought the knife closer to her arm. Adolf, with a much more terrifying look, told Vikir to get away from his niece. Vikir released Camus as she ran to hug his uncle, crying. She was in utter disbelief that Vikir tried to cut her arm. Adolf loudly complains to Hugo, but Hugo nonchalantly told Vikir that he believed he's taken the joke too far. Vikir revealed the knife to be a plastic toy. He apologizes to them, claiming it's a common joke pulled within the family and he didn't intend to make her cry. Adolf asks Hugo why he will let kids have toys like that. Hugo tells Deputy Patriarch Adolf that he was getting overly involved in child's play. He also said that he had ideas on what to do regarding the ruby mines. Camus with a teary face promised Vikir she won't forget this and Vikir should watch out. This amuses Vikir as he smiles. Outside on the estate's compound, the friendly duels between the Baskerville and the Morgue had begun. An occasion where children ages 8 to 15 gather and battle it out. While those around the age of 8 challenge each other in theory or mana sensitivity, children around the age of 15 grab the most attention with live battles. However, everyone's attention was headed somewhere else for this year's friendly duels. In one of the arena was the renowned mage clan, Morgue clan, Camus Morgue. On the other end facing her was the iron-blooded sword clan, Baskerville clan, Vikir van Baskerville. The showcase duel between the two geniuses of the respective clans. They were to the practical training rules as per request by the Morgues. A bell tolls indicating for the duel to begin. Camus warns Vikir that she won't hold back and immediately start casting a quadra spell with a smug look on her face. This surprises her peers as Adolf brags about it to Hugo. Camus aimed and directed frost wind, fire, and lightning at Vikir. Vikir comfortably dodges all 3 attacks, taunting her saying her spells are flashy. He also amusedly suggests she would do better if she focuses on one spell. This only pisses her off even further, as she, claiming a worm like Vikir, knows nothing about magic. Camus puts a sand wall between them as Vikir approaches her. The sand wall was broken down easily as Camus wondered in shock about the power of a Baskerville basked in the Styx River. She shuts her eyes, regretting letting her guard down as Vikir approaches her. Camus opens her eyes when nothing happened, only to be flicked on the forehead. Vikir continues to taunt, which made her erect a double sand wall, proudly saying Vikir won't be able to break the sand wall this time around. Vikir thought of how pointless it was since he can just walk around it, but decided to play along a little bit. Vikir plunged his right hand through the double sand wall. He joked about the incident earlier and flicks Camus again on the exact spot on her forehead. Vikir underestimates Camus' tenacity as she continues to launch fury of attacks. As the fight dragged on, Vikir noticed the duel beside his and thought of taking advantage of their reckless display of their abilities. The duel was between a mage that keeps casting flame magic and a swordsman that slices magic. Vikir carefully steered his duel with Camus such that the attack of the next flame was aligned head-on against Camus. He jumped backwards with a smug on his face, taunting her to better have a defensive spell ready, knowing full well it's already too late. A cloud of smoke formed at the arena after the hit. Adolf and the other mages present were all in panic, assuming the worst. In the arena, engulfed in smoke, Camus is on the floor with her clothes mostly burned. She manages to avoid getting hurt with a defensive spell, but the flame burned almost all of her clothes. Camus fears the embarrassment and a laughingstock she might become. At the same time, Vikir tosses her his jacket to cover herself. Camus was confused as to why Vikir would help her, considering she is an enemy. He suggested taking his jacket back, which sobers her up from her confused state. It then dawned on Vikir that his arm was bleeding. It was cut by that reckless swordsman's sword, which must have had some remaining ore on it. At that moment, the smoke had mostly cleared and they were easily spotted by everyone. Adolf was relieved that Camus was okay, but Hugo just quietly observes the scene. They weren't to decide the winner though, since Camus was on the ground covered in burnt clothes and Vikir was on his feet with a cut on his arm. The mages were amazed with Vikir's physique and wondered how much he's trained his body. Adolf rushed to the arena to comfort Camus' flustered state. On the hallway to Hugo's office, Vikir tells Hugo he learned the purpose of the event once again. Hugo was interested as to why Vikir didn't go for a clear strike. Vikir answered he hesitated a little because he'd never fought a girl before. Hugo said his injury should be a lesson to never letting your guard down in battle again. This shocked Vikir because Hugo seemed to be worried. This is because the Hugo he knew will never in a million years. The Hugo he knew was always so cold, so strict and so brutal. It was rumored that Hugo's personality got so bad after he lost his first wife and eldest daughter. But that's not Vikir's problem though. Hugo again asked Vikir what he thinks they should do with the ruby mines. "I believe we should give it away," said Vikir. His reason was that the main task of the Baskerville clan is to grow their territories. The Red All Mountain that the ruby mines are located is downstream from the Le Rouge et Le Noir Mountain. Also, the monsters and barbarians living there will become a problem. If they can utilize the Morgue clan well, they may be able to minimize the losses incurred during the expansion into the region. Once the Morgue clan receives control over the ruby mines, they will assign a great number of people there. All the Baskervilles need to do is push the monsters and barbarians into that region. This would take care of all the problems at once. Hugo enjoys the idea of the rubies bathed in the blood of their enemies, and it will also make the Morgue clan think twice before entering the Baskerville's territory. Hugo commented on Vikir's idea being 90% in line with his. "Of course it would be. That's because it was your idea you originally came up with," thought Vikir. "And I was the one tasked in pushing the monsters and barbarians to the Morgue." Adolf and Camus were both waiting for Hugo and Vikir to return so they can continue with their discussion earlier. Camus could not stop blushing and staring at Vikir, for which Vikir paid no attention to. Back in Hugo's office, Adolphe suggested how they should peacefully resolve the issues regarding the ruby mine, which was an engagement. Adolphe proposed an engagement between the Morgue and the Baskerville children. The eldest son of the Baskervilles and the eldest daughter of the Morgues, which was Camus, but Hugo drew his attention to the age gap. Adolphe continued to say that 17 years difference isn't too big of an issue, but Camus refused to marry anyone weaker than her mother. Adolphe replied Camus that if she plans on marrying someone stronger than her mother, then she will have to live her entire life alone. Camus compromised, suggesting that is either that or marrying someone her age or younger with the potential of that. Hugo replied that it wasn't a buffet of her choosing, to which she again blushes and stare at Vikir, drawing the attention of Adolphe, Hugo and Vikir also. Adolphe tried to reason with Camus that Vikir was an illegitimate child. And no matter what happens, Vikir will always be a small fish in a big pond. That comment, for some odd reason, pisses Hugo off and said the most important thing in engagements is what the people involved have in mind. He asked Vikir what his thoughts about this new development. Vikir simply replied that he accepts to do as he's told. This answer angered Adolphe, and Camus thought since Vikir was not opposed of the idea, then he might be shyer than he portrays himself to be. Hugo claims names and titles have no meaning in the Baskerville household. The lackluster people come from those of Lu descent, and great people come from those of Van descent as well. Adolphe was still not convinced though, as he got up to assess Vikir. Vikir does the same, thinking of how Adolphe is a six-circle master, one of the strongest within the renowned mage clan and a great supporter of his niece. His thoughts were interrupted by Adolphe stating it's quite unwise of Vikir for the Morgue clan to have just anyone become the husband of Camus. Adolphe grabbed Vikir's shoulder, wondering how an 8-year-old child has sturdy body. He asked Vikir for a reply, to which Vikir confidently replied that he wasn't listening to whatever Adolphe saying after he suggested it wasn't wise to tell him that. Adolphe laughed, and Camus was amazed Vikir had the audacity to say that to her uncle. Adolphe asked Hugo the permission to engage in a deeper conversation with Vikir, since he might be his niece's husband. Hugo added why the mage of the Morgue Empire is going to scold an 8-year-old child. Adolphe wasn't requesting as a patriarch of the Morgue clan but as an uncle. Camus was against the idea, but Hugo agreed. They went back to the arena, but this time around it was Adolphe who will be doing the evaluation personally. He formed a pot with filled water from thin air using fire, water, and earth simultaneously. This amazes Camus. Adolphe placed the pot on his head as a handicap. Vikir wins if he managed to spill a single drop from the pot as they duel. He asked Vikir to show him everything he got, to which Vikir thought that Adolphe might pass out if he did. Vikir thought of how this is a great chance to experience the power of Adolphe and what he's capable of. And this was also the reason Hugo accepted the request. Vikir launched at Adolphe head-on and swung his sword at Adolphe's magic shield, but it didn't make any dent. Camus complained that it is half-witted to fight his uncle head-on, to which Adolphe replied whose side she's on. Adolphe went on the offense and launches 4 magic flame balls at Vikir. Hugo noticed that the attacks were at a speed that makes it difficult but not impossible to dodge, so he doesn't need to interfere. At the same time, Camus complained again why her uncle never used magic like this when dueling with her. Vikir thought that the fact he is an 8-year-old with the knowledge from his regressed life before, he might be able to kill Adolphe if he lets his guard down due to him being a child. Adolphe tells Vikir how pointless his attacks were, but later realized that Vikir has been striking the same spot with such perfect precision like a machine. His spell shield begun to crack, however Vikir's sword finally broke. Hugo and Camus were equally shocked by the results. Adolphe's words were cut short when water started dripping down on him as a piece of Vikir's broken sword managed to pierce through the shield and the pot. Vikir basked in his victory as Camus covered her mouth, saying although it was a coincidence that Vikir won against her uncle, this results would mean marriage. Coincidence? Having the broken sword coincidentally pierce the pot, Hugo thought with a smirk on his face. Hugo was now convinced that he really might be raising a much stronger hound than he initially anticipated.